today with all of my SNAP Texas leaders. This is truly a first. And we are from Houston, San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, Victoria. It's also historical though, because we stand with other survivor advocates all across Texas, Boy Scout and camp abuse survivors, all the way from Amarillo, I might say, and those who have fought the statute of limitations fight in other states and won. So we group together. Most importantly though, we are here with all of you, the survivors, the supporters, the advocates, to support the Texas statute of limitations reform movement. Because you know the cost of childhood sex abuse to lives and families for generations. This day represents the power of people working together to help survivors, so we never, ever have to hear again, "It's too late for me." We are here to support statute of limitations reform. It is trauma-informed care at the highest level, our legislation. And so here today is a legislator who understands why this is so important to survivors. I want to introduce to you today Representative Ann Johnson, our Texas House Representative of District 134. She is a former Chief Human Trafficking Prosecutor and current attorney serving victims of sexual exploitation. She created and filed House Bill 206 that eliminates the statute of limitations for survivors of childhood sex abuse retroactively. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank the survivors for being here. And I want to know, for many of us, we have not known your stories. It was when I was a prosecutor representing and advocating on behalf of victims of human trafficking and child sexual abuse that I saw the need for those voices to be lifted. We have made great progress over this last decade with regard to this issue, and we have passed wonderful laws, but this is the one that needs to now be fixed. The state of Texas has effectively protected the abusers of children by giving them a closed door after a number of years. And you know that as victims of sexual abuse, often as children, you are groomed or taught that you did something wrong to deserve it. Those victims hide in the shadows. And it is only those victims who can find the day when their courage to come forward is there. And this law says that at whatever day you find your courage and your voice to be heard, we will open the doors to justice for you. And the state of Texas, for the future and now, will be with you and stand with you so that you can ensure that justice is done and many others are protected. So thank you for bringing your voice here today. And the voice it is to yes on House Bill 206. Let's get this done for every child in Texas, for today and for their future. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome to our state capitol as we formally introduce you to House Bill 206 and Senate Bill 751, which would permanently eliminate the civil statutes of limitations, allowing survivors of child sexual abuse to take legal action against predators. My name is Eduardo Lopez de Casas, and I serve on the National Board of SNAP, the Survivors Network of Those Abused by Police. I am also a childhood abuse survivor, advocate, and public speaker. It has been estimated that incidents of child sexual abuse have cost the federal government over $9 billion a year, and the adverse effects of childhood trauma have been shown to lead to multiple health risk behaviors in adults. It is high time to shift the cost of child sexual abuse away from the victims and taxpayers to the institutions who actually caused it. In our 30-plus years of existence, SNAP has led the way to SOL reform in 24 states and the 15 states that have totally eradicated the statutes of limitations. We are currently working on SOL reforms in other states, including this effort in Texas today. We are proud to support the passage of House Bill 206 and Senate Bill 751 and urge all of you to join us in our efforts by calling on your local representatives and expressing your support of our efforts here today. Over 45 years ago, I was abused by a priest, several of my teachers, and a scoutmaster. The child in me asks that you please understand the suffering and hardships that victims such as myself struggle with on a daily basis. Some turn to drugs, some become alcoholics, most suffer with lifelong PTSD, and unfortunately, many turn to suicide when the weight of their abuse grows too heavy. House Bill 206, filed on the first day of this legislative session, and Senate Bill 751 permanently eliminates the civil statutes of limitations, allowing survivors of child sexual abuse to take legal action against predators and, more importantly, the institutions that have enabled them. We ask that you take the time today to hear the stories of the survivors here so that we can feel the warmth of a society that cares and will join our cause as we walk the road to justice, which begins here on the steps of our state capitol today. To tell us more of what victims of sexual abuse actually suffer and struggle to overcome, let's welcome psychotherapist Dr. Amy Kempter.
Good morning. My name is Amy Kempter, and I'm a therapist who has a practice in San Antonio, and I'm a professor of clinical social work at the University of Texas at San Antonio. I specialize in the treatment of trauma and addiction, with early childhood sexual abuse being a primary focus. Thank you for having me here today. Through my work, I've had the opportunity to work with many brave individuals who have experienced and survived clergy sexual abuse, but only sought treatment years after the event, when both symptoms of PTSD and often substance use became too impairing to live any semblance of a normal life. Now, although seeking treatment at any age should be celebrated, the reality, though, is that trauma to the brain, right, creates many, many impairing symptoms and can create a virtual living prison for a survivor of clergy abuse. Symptoms of PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, can include hypervigilance, isolation, nightmares, difficulty focusing, depression, intrusive thoughts, and often a paralyzing fear. And these symptoms are often experienced at times that should be normal in life. Taking a kiddo to a soccer game, meeting a friend for a movie, attending a church service. Often people ask me, don't survivors just get over it? And the answer is, unfortunately, no. Numerous studies have demonstrated the impact that early childhood sexual abuse has on the developing brain. One's ability to learn, one's self-esteem, one's ability to earn income, and even life expectancy. This is not new science. And the answer is that people don't just simply get over it. Although we are still learning about brain functioning, we have known that the brain is impacted and changed by trauma. Think of it this way. Our brain is like our body, and it's designed to heal. But just like our body, there can be wounds that are too intense, too damaging for our brain to just heal on its own. Trauma is that metaphoric emotional gunshot to the brain, where the brain is unable to process through the events and instead attempts to adapt by creating an environment where an individual is always on guard and is in a constant state of fight or flight. This impacts many, many parts of the brain, but the one we're going to focus on today is what we know is our emotional smoke detector of the brain, the amygdala. To this part of the brain, trauma is devastating. PTSD, in a simplified neurobiological definition, is an overactive amygdala, or a brain that is constantly sending messages of danger and releasing those chemicals associated with danger. You've probably heard of them: adrenaline, cortisol. Cortisol signals to other parts of the brain that an individual needs to remain in this hyper-aroused state. And this often inhibits the release of those good neurotransmitters, right? GABA, dopamine, serotonin. In other words, PTSD is a treatable medical brain condition that many individuals will need to seek treatment. It's a condition that lasts for days, weeks, months, and yes, even years after the abuse ends, often long after any legal statute of limitations has expired. House Bill 206 provides one avenue of support for survivors to help gain access to resources and treatment. It's not just about ending the abuse. It's about treating the individual and recognizing that sexual abuse can cause lifelong changes to the mind and the body. Survivors have suffered long enough. The time is now to focus on opportunities for healing. Thank you.
Now we present to you an internationally recognized expert on all aspects of child abuse and exploitation, who specializes in abuse investigation, detection, and prevention efforts for organizations serving youth, such as ours. Let's give a nice Austin welcome to Detective Michael Johnston.
How are y'all doing?
Good.
It's an honor to be here with you today. I want to thank the organizers for this rally to end civil statute of limitations in the great state of Texas. More importantly, I want to thank all of you victims and survivors, you boys and girls, and now adults, because I know it's been a long journey for you to get to this day. I want to thank all of your friends and your family who have supported you in this effort. We're all here today to plug a significant gap in Texas law, and that is to remove the civil statute of limitations today and retroactively. It did my heart good to learn that Representative Ann Johnson's a former prosecutor, because we come from the same area. She gets it, because she's seen those cases just like I have in my numerous investigations. My name is Mike Johnson. I'm a retired police detective from Plano, Texas. Born and raised here in San Antonio, went to school at Texas State, back then it was Southwest Texas State University. Lived here in Austin. Went to Pierce Junior High School, the first class to be LBJ. My wife and I literally hung out at 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Don't tell those troopers over there, but we used to hang out on the Capitol grounds back when we were young, hanging out on 6th Street back in the old days. I am a son of the great state of Texas. My family is primarily in Guadalupe County and Seguin. And after graduating from college, I went to, again, Southwest Texas, and my first job that I got was with the City of Plano Police Department. I got there in 1982 after 4 years of patrol and working undercover narcotics assignment. I got assigned to the Criminal Investigation Division, and where for 24 of my 28 years I investigated child sexual abuse. I did not realize that was a long period of time until later when I started training, and I learned from others that was a long period of time. What that did for me, just to give you some perspective, is I have interviewed hundreds, probably more than that, of victims of child sexual abuse. I've talked to their families, and I've interrogated the perpetrators who commit these offenses. I have a very clear understanding of what child sexual abuse like my colleague does. Okay? A very clear understanding of what it is and what it does to families. You know me, and you may not know me, but you know my work. If any of you are familiar with the Ashley's Laws legislation, you're looking at one of the people who testified before then Houston representative of the Criminal Justice Committee to get that legislation passed. If you're familiar with children's advocacy centers and multidisciplinary teams, you're looking at what the founders and one of the people who helped create those at the national level. It was interesting when we were working on the sex offender registration notification, some other legislation that allows victims and families and survivors to better protect their children. I was talking to one of the ACLU type attorneys who was opposing the right and the ability for parents and public to know who was living next door to them, basically, if this was a child molester or not. And after this incredibly strong debate, I caught her in the during the break, and I asked her, I said, "Are you a parent?" And she said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, how old are your kids?" She said she had 2 daughters, 6 and 8 or something like that. I said, "Tell me, do you feel like you have the right to know whether or not the man living next door has a history for molesting kids?" I'm not talking about whether or not he, steals cars or whether or not he has, is an alcoholic, but do you feel like you have a right to know that, to keep your kids safe? And she said, "Yes, absolutely. I feel like So I said, "Help me understand why you're opposing this measure, why this measure is such an issue, but when you think about yourself as a mother, as a parent, you feel like you have a right to know that." I think some of that has a lot to do with what we're talking about today. In May of 2010, I got a phone call from the national headquarters of the Boy Scouts of America. They had just got dinged, basically to the tune of $18.5 million in a civil lawsuit in Portland, Oregon. It's referred to in Boy Scout civil lawsuit circles as ground zero for child sexual abuse against the organization. They contacted me and asked me if I would be willing to come to work for them as their first director of youth protection. Pretty lofty opportunity. I thought this was fantastic for a police detective work with child abuse to go and consult with what I believe was an organization that was committed to protecting scouts and children in its numerous programs. I mean, I really thought this was fantastic. I actually asked the executive search team that had some attorneys on it if the Boy Scouts of America is right. And their message is just to be in commitment. They said, "Oh, absolutely, they're right. Man, was I lied to, basically. During my interview process, they asked me, what is my view of child sexual abuse, especially in the organization in general? I said it's zero tolerance. And I didn't say anything else. They said, "What do you mean by zero tolerance?" I said, the beauty of zero tolerance, you don't have to worry about trying to define it. I just stated how I feel about it. I have zero tolerance for any individual that will sexually abuse a child. I have zero tolerance for any organization that has any knowledge and is complicit in the sexual abuse of children. I'll be honest with you, I thought that I would be off of the opportunity to be hired, and they subsequently hired me, which I thought meant that the organization was serious. 82,209. Many of you may not know this, but that's the number of boys, now men, some here represented today, my colleagues, that after the Boy Scouts of America filed bankruptcy because of the number of child sexual abuse claims and the anticipation of civil statute of limitations reform, came forward with proof of claim. They had to prove that they were sexually abused in Scouting. I want you to do the math on that. 82,209. What's as significant is 5,369 of those men and some women were sexually abused in the great state of Texas. I want you to think about that. Now I want to do a little, just so that you know we're operating from the same standpoint. Prevalence research on child sexual abuse is 5% of boys will experience some type of sexual abuse or harm by their 18th birthday. The statistic for girls is 25%. I want you to think about that in reference to 82,000 plus boys, now men, nationally, and that simple number of 5,369 boys. And do the math as it relates to potential for girls in sexual abuse. And know that the Boy Scouts of America has welcomed girls into its organization. And if you talk to anybody with the Boy Scout, they will tell you, and I know exactly what they'll tell you because I was there in the national headquarters. They will tell you that most of those cases or incidences occurred decades, years ago. The beauty of this legislation is it acknowledges a very simple fact about victimization. The delayed disclosure. And the fact for many of the men here represented and many of the men who've experienced child sexual abuse, there is a difference in female disclosure and male disclosure. Let me just make something we know in the field in investigating these cases. It takes men at least 20 years to even acknowledge to somebody that they care about, usually a wife or therapist, that they've even experienced this, let alone it's been taken to an attorney or to law enforcement or what have you. And then, just as the doctor said, you start looking at some of the other effects that it has on these men and these children. Child sexual abuse in institutions by these predators is usually committed by people in positions of trust that have access and opportunity to children. Let me explain something to you about organizations like the Boy Scouts of America, Catholic Church, and some of these institutions. They know what the risks are in their organization. They're more interested in media campaign of messaging about how safe they are. One of the reasons I left the Boy Scouts of America is they wanted me to come forward nationally and say that the organization was safe. I refused to do so. They put a lot of pressure on me to do that. It was quite a meeting when they asked me to do that. I said the organization is somewhat safer because of some of my efforts and some other experts, but it's not nearly safe enough, especially when you consider the advent of girls. Well, they, as an organization, they weren't happy about that, and within 6 months I was asked to leave. When I was asked to leave, they asked me to sign a NDA, non-disclosure, non-disparagement agreement. I refused to sign it. Basically, a walking away from my separation, the money I was supposed to receive for our retirement. And I did. I walked away, and I sat and thought about it, and I realized, you know what? Me being silent is being complicit with what I know about what's happening with this organization. Thank you. Thank you. And that didn't set with me. But you know, I'm not dumb. You know, my mom and daddy didn't raise a dumb Texan. So I realized I needed to get some support. So I reached out to an attorney. And if you're interested in watching it, you're more than welcome to watch it. I know Garrison has. You can go on YouTube, I think, as well as, but go on YouTube and Google Boy Scouts of America Youth Protection Whistleblower. Scouting is not safe, and you will see a wonderful, wonderful not because I was at it, but wonderful because of my colleagues and other survivors and attorneys that talked about sexual abuse and scouting, and the letter we submitted to Congress, United States Congress, because Boy Scouts is a congressionally chartered organization calling on an investigation. And there also list and lay out things that needed to be changed, things that I was trying to change while I was there. There's a whole nother story there. But I know what the risks are in that organization. I know what the risks are with the Mormon Church. A lot of people don't know that the LDS of the Mormon Church at the time was one of the top sponsoring chartered organizations of Scouts. And if you look at the bankruptcy litigation, they are the top church organization for the number of survivors. We're talking about a lot of boys. We're talking about a lot of men. When Boy Scouts was interviewing, I told them I had zero tolerance. And I was going to continue to stand for survivors of sexual abuse in scouting. I heard every single one of their experiences, read a lot, talked to a lot, and that is what buoys me to this day. The great state of Texas is long overdue to make it clear no more will our youth organizations, predators, be able to hide behind civil statute of limitations. No more will institutions be allowed to hide sexual deviants, child predators, and sex offenders. With today's rally, we send a clear message to our legislators, especially the ones who support us, that we got your back, okay? Right? We got your back. Yep. What the Boy Scouts of America, Catholic Church, and numerous other sections of youth-serving organizations need to understand, including the Mormon Church, camps, WISE, you name the organization sector that's serving kids, that we are parents of children in the great state of Texas. And you know, I take a lot of pride in being from Texas. This is Texas. We have zero tolerance for anybody that's for the individuals and the organizations that will hurt children. We need to make sure it's clear to these organizations with children, and that the safety of our children is not just a slogan or a marketing pitch they get to throw around. that via civil litigation and criminal investigation, my law enforcement colleagues support me in this also, your organizations and practices or their lack of or ineffective practices and policies and training will be scrutinized by not only the parents but the best prevention experts and lawyers in the great state of Texas and beyond. Your iconic reputations will not protect you any longer. Playing on the ignorance of the masses will not protect you any longer. Non-disclosure agreements will not protect you any longer. Attorney privilege will not protect you any longer. You know what I'm talking about, right? Shredding documents will not protect you any longer. You will be defined by actually how you actually protect the children in your care, not by what you say about protecting children in your care. It is an honor to be here. Harrison, thank you for the invite. Thank you as colleagues. Let's make this happen. It's very important.
At this time, we present to you a wonderful guest here among our illustrious speakers, a person who I personally have witnessed do many things in the greater Houston area, a very hardworking civil servant, and I present to you now District 137 of the Texas House Representative, Mr. Gene Wu.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to see all of you here because this is a great start to what needs to be a much larger movement across the state. You know, for too long, our society, our state, our nation has, in fact, worked in the opposite direction of where we needed to go. That we spent too much time excusing abusers, covering up for their deeds, covering up their abuse, and saying, well, it was something that happened in the past, let's just let it go. What about justice for the victims? What about preventing this for the future? And those types of policies, those types of reaction, that type of behavior in our halls of power allowed things to go on, allowed things to continue because there was no accountability, because if you waited long enough, it would just go away. It encouraged abusers. It said to them, the state will protect you. And what we're here to do today and supporting this bill and other bills like it is to say, no, that is not the direction that our state is going to go. We will go the opposite way. We will protect victims. We will protect survivors. We will protect children. And we will not let anyone who abuses children hide from justice. We will not let time shield them, and we will not let the law shield them. And we will go after them for as long as we have breath in our body. So I'm here to stand with you, and we will put an end, and we will do our very, very best to make sure that not a single child more has to suffer the trauma and abuse that too many people have gone through. We will make a better future for our children. Thank you.
Our next speaker is the co-founder and president of SCSA, Survivors of Childhood Sex Abuse. He is a survivor, victim, activist, advocate, and a true warrior in our struggles to find peace and justice for the survivors of sexual abuse. He's also a wonderful friend of mine, Mr. Richard Winman.
Hello, thanks for having me. I know this is a work day and some of y'all had to take off, so I appreciate y'all coming out. I am the co-founder and president of SCSA. We're a nonprofit. We advocate for and support through peer-led support meetings adult victims of childhood sex abuse. That's our core function. And we serve over 3,000 members. And I hear all the stories. My story, very briefly, is that at a very young age, I was in the Boy Scouts of America, and it wasn't a Boy Scout troop, it was a front for a pedophile ring, international pedophile ring. And I was raped by many, many men. They would fly in from out of town, internationally. They recorded me through film and pictures. Today, my kiddie porn is still on the dark web in the 70s. Policeman who investigated and busted them, he was the commander of the pedophile unit of the New Orleans Police Department. After all that was done, he kept an eye on me, and he eventually raped me. He was a pedophile. And then from there, he would make me have sex with men so that he could make pedophile cases against them. So, and we're talking a span of abuse from 7 years old to 17 years old. So I don't have repressed memories at all. But what I do have is I have CPTSD, and I have anxiety, and I have major treatment-resistant depression. And the way that I get through the day is medication, peer-led support groups, trauma-informed therapists such as advanced therapies like EMDR. The reason that I've mentioned this, my story, is because I'm an expert on why people don't come forward until they're 52 years old, on average. So in my case, I was told that nobody would believe me. It would be my fault if I was believed. The police officer, Stanley Burkhart, when I refused to go out and have sex with men, he put his service pistol in my mouth. And so, you know, what these abusers do is they coerce, they threaten my mom and dad too. They threaten, you're not going to be believed. This is a secret between us and in the church context. It's between us and God, and it's not a sin that you can't tell your parents. It's our little secret. So what happens is, because it's a secret, you have this misplaced shame, guilt, and fear as a doctor. And so you don't tell anybody. You keep it a secret. And I matriculated through life. After my abuse stopped, I committed suicide. I say committed because it wasn't a cry for help. I intended to die, and I wound up in a hospital emergency room in a coma for 5 days. But after that, life got good. I had a brilliant academic career and just drifted through life, a brilliant professional career, wonderful family. You would think everything's okay. But at 52, the exact age, it hit me very, 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 very hard. And I do what most victims and survivors did, self-medicate, because you can't tell anybody, you're not talking to anybody, so you have to self-medicate to stop the pain. And that's usually drugs, alcohol is in my case, alcohol, and eventually, when that stops working, and it does stop working, suicide. And we commit suicide en masse. We've lost 3 advocates in just the last year and a half. These are guys that are well along on their healing path. They've become advocates, they're professionals at this, and then just one day they snap and they kill themselves. So that's it in a nutshell. I'll steal a line from Mike McDonald. Mike McDonald said, ask any kid what the statute of limitations is. They don't know. You can ask a 25-year-old what the statute of limitations is. They don't know. They have no idea that the clock is ticking. The clock is ticking. And you know, these victims and survivors, they deserve justice. And it's not just for the adult survivors, but this legislation will also affect our present children and our future children. And they deserve protection. This is a bipartisan issue. Everybody can get behind the idea that we need to protect our children. It's fundamental to who we are. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Just to clarify, it's Curtis John Garrison. My online name, long story, I had to use a different name because, anyway. Okay, sorry about that. I'm Curtis John Garrison. Who am I? All right. I'm a little cloudy right now, thank you, because Michael's speech, I'm sorry, I just haven't heard. This is a long journey to get to this day, is what I'm trying to say. So my name is Curtis Garrison, and I'm a Boy Scouts child sex abuse survivor. And some of my abuse happened in Louisiana, where the troop was, and it happened in Arkansas, where the camp and canoeing happened, and also in Texas, where I've been here since the late 1980s. Over the years, I tried countless times to get help. But I kept getting silenced. I'm sorry, guys. I was silenced by fear, shame, intimidation, and a scout law. Gosh. That taught me to be too loyal, obedient, and reverent. Time had passed, and I got through college. Gosh, I hope you can hear me. I got through college. I started a corporate job, but all along I was struggling because I felt guilt and fear, continuing to see other kids getting abused and nobody doing anything about it. Nobody in the right leader positions that had the ability would do anything about it. Then I was silenced because I waited too long, and I saw the statute of limitations. I mean, I was looking it up and expired. And the worst thing that hit me about that is you're looking at the different states, and just out of luck, you may or may not have a chance because of a law, not because of the crime. Wherever you are, the laws are different, and that's abusing the survivors if they don't have a law that supports the survivors. Why would there be laws to protect child rapists and silence child abuse survivors? Makes no total, it's crazy. People that create and support laws that do this are passive perpetrators. They're not committing the actual abuse, but they're passively abusing these survivors. Try to remember any institution that has ever come forward and said, we've got a perpetrator that is abusing our people and we're gonna get rid of them, we're gonna address it, and they only will do it if they're forced to by external forces. Why is that? Aren't the churches and the schools supposed to take care of our kids and take the action needed without people getting together and building an army, changing laws to force them to do it? 4 decades had passed. This was the early 80s when I was in Boy Scouts. I'm 54 in April. So it's been a while, and I desperately searched for a way to hold the Boy Scouts accountable. I finally hired the right attorney, which was part of the reason why the Boy Scouts ultimately filed for bankruptcy February 18th, 2020, right before the pandemic. We went up to Delaware, army of lawyers, all trying to figure out how they're going to control and address potentially thousands. It was only like maybe 10 or 8 to 10 they're thinking. It turned out to be, like Michael said, 82,000 claims. February the 18th, 2020 means that this 3 days from now, it'll be 3 years for this bankruptcy to drag on as people struggle dealing with this and being abused further by a system, a bankruptcy that is not meant to handle child sex abuse. We're not loaning them money that they owe us. We don't sell them products that they need to pay us for. We're people that were abused sexually by people they covered up and hid. Since then, the good news is Louisiana and Arkansas, these two states actually within the last year and a half to 2 years, opened their statute of limitations, along with 22 other states that have retroactive or revival statute of limitation laws. So Texas, it's time to reform our statute of limitations. Now, from my research, which I've done to make sure I don't get anything overclaimed or whatever, and from the bankruptcy notes details, I've got 3,092 confirmed at the least Boy Scout child sex abuse survivors in Texas alone that are claimants in the bankruptcy. Now, I just heard from Michael that it's like 5,000, and I'm sorry I went blank because I was blown away at the exact number, but I'm hoping there's a lot of past claims before the bankruptcy. In fact, if you look at the numbers throughout the years, it's 82,209 claims for the bankruptcy when they had a period to claim and file in the bankruptcy. All the years of their existence, it was 82,458. So I want to mention, that's in the bankruptcy documents. Okay, sorry. Throughout the years, they were up to like 2,000 or 3,000 almost every year. A few hundred, then the 2,000, and it started going down as they started using statute of limitations, NDAs, hotlines like the Mormon Church, Boy Scouts, like, hey, we need to help you. Okay, counseling, don't sue, don't, just let it go away. I'm really ad-libbing here a little bit, I'm sorry. So there's a lot. I know a lot personally that won't even come forward that didn't make a claim, and that's what really haunts me, is the people just won't even, they're very scared what people will think of their job, their family, don't want to cause them pain, all that. So with the 3,092 that I have, and it's a number in the bankruptcy for particular claims in Texas, I just want to give you an idea of what the 3,092 alone would mean, that if we gave them just 1 minute, 3,092 people, give them 1 minute to share their story, it would take 52 hours or 2 days straight that we would be here giving them just 1 minute. So that number is huge, but it's hard to understand how big of a number these are. And my question is, like, just how many does it take? How many do we know that we don't even know that they're survivors and they're struggling because they won't come forward and hold someone accountable? So the only way to stop a predator from harming another child is to allow those that have been harmed, maybe not the other way, I'm just saying you've got to allow the ones that were harmed to be able to come forward and hold them accountable so that it just doesn't keep happening. If this person is going to jail and this institution is no longer going to court and defending these people that are raping kids, then you're going to stop them and hold them accountable. If not, it's decades and decades and more repeated abuse kids. So Texas, I want to know why this state, why our state of Texas is not leading the country, showing them how to do this. How do we stop child sex abuse? How do we get laws and hold these people accountable? I want to know also why the churches and the schools, all these people are involved, because it's just the Boy Scouts with these organizations, their charters underneath them, that they're part of hiding these child abuse perpetrators, and they should all be champions to stop this child abuse and demand that survivors are never kept silent. So I don't know why it is that when an institution has child sex abuse so big of a problem that you hear jokes about it, you know, SNL skits, memes, you know, like, oh, it's just a funny thing and it's just, that's the way it is. It normalizes it so that when people finally come forward and are trying to protest against child abuse, people are offended that you're trying to attack the institution. But really, if the institution is involved in this and they are attacking, harassing, defaming the people that are abused, they must be held accountable. It's a real tragedy that there's so much pain and destruction in these families, because you get divisions on who's going to support the child or who's going to try to hide it. You know, don't let the church get upset at us for making a claim. Don't let the family go through this. It's too painful. Forget it. All this is unnecessary to impact the child's life forever and never allow them to be the potential they could have been without that abuse. And it impacts their families, their communities, their religion. But all of this is allowed to be continued just simply for child rapists, these people that are doing this, to get gratified and have their power and control. It's about them that we need to address. And the institutions hiding them, whatever the reason they're hiding them, it's got to stop.
Hell yeah, bro. That's right. Hell yeah.
No one is above the law. They must all be held accountable. And if laws aren't holding people accountable, those laws have to change.
That's right. Yes, sir.
So, I'll get some water. I appreciate it. I haven't spoken public like this for decades. So to all the child sex abuse survivors, we need to let you know that you're not alone. Unfortunately, there's just too many of us that have been allowed, people have been allowed to abuse us and harm too many people. But unfortunately, because there's so many of us, for the perpetrators, more of us are standing out, and we're going to speak out against child abuse and hold these people accountable like they've never seen before. To our state representatives and senators, you have two options. I know where you're at. You can vote to support Texas SOL reform, which will be the key to open the door and free child sex abuse survivors from a prison that has kept them silent. Or you can do something I can't understand and vote against it and keep helping the perpetrators that have and will continue to rape these children. Texas, it is now time we reform our statute of limitations. Thank you.
Our next speaker is the father of an abuse survivor of a Christian youth camp called Kanakuk. His was the only family not to sign a non-disclosure agreement, which allows him to share his son's story with us here today. From Amarillo, Texas, Joe Alarcon.
Thank you. To everybody who has listened to I recently got involved in this effort to on this reform of statute of limitations, and thank you so much for those who are standing up for families like mine. First, I'm just gonna forgive me because this is very real to me, and so I'm gonna do my best to share my testimony. My name is Joe Alarco, and I'm from Amarillo, and I'm here today to represent the victims of summer camp abuse in this state and around the country. My son Ashton Alarco survived an atrocious crime by Pete Newman, who was a director at Kennecott camps based in Missouri. He was abused in multiple states, including Texas. We were able to pursue justice in Ashton's case within statute, but our family has since met many fellow Kennecott victims who have only recently come to realize the extent of the crimes at Kennecott that were committed there, basically through investigative journalism efforts. Unfortunately, many of them do not have any legal remedies available to them because of the statute of limitations. As recently as Monday, they were testifying in Missouri to get a statute of limitations reform, and one of my friends, Evan, who testified, by the time that he was able to find his voice, was not able to hold anybody accountable. We've also come to know families whose children have died through deaths of suicide, overdoses, because of despair and hopelessness, because of the evil that's allowed already. HB 206 contains so much of this right here. Our story is that when we sued Kennecott and Joe White is the owner of Kennecott Camps. At the time, he was dubbed the expert in teenage therapy. Little did we know and realize that they had no desire to do the right thing, but rather make it harder for us to move forward. In my case, I refused to sign an NDA, a non-disparagement agreement, and in turn, they sued me. During this case right here, my family, our ultimate goal was to find out the truth. We wanted to know who knew, when, and why there was nothing done. Unfortunately, we found out that just months after Pete became an employee of Kennecott, he immediately started abusing kids. Unfortunately, at camp, they wrote disciplinary forms. They put it in his HR file. They would write things like, you are not allowed to sleep naked with kids. You are not allowed to play basketball naked with kids. You are not allowed skinny dipping with kids. You're not allowed to do Bible studies in your hot tub naked. These are the things that are in his HR form. And for 10 years, this rhetoric continued. Pete Newman would have been fired the day that the first time that he was caught. My son would not be a victim today. During my case, their attorneys filed with the federal courts to sanction me personally. They asked for $23,000 that I pay their attorney's fees because I would not sign an NDA. I spent over $40,000 of my personal money defending myself against this silencing tactics. Statute of limitations and NDAs are laws that predators and criminals hide behind. HB 206 can start to change. Can start to change that right there. In our case, even though that I did not have to sign an NDA, our story does not end there. My son Ashton today, he has worked so hard to overcome his crimes, the crimes that were committed against him. I'm proud to announce that he is in his 4th year of dental school at Columbia University in New York City. He is a 2nd lieutenant in the Air Force. When he graduates in May, he'll be a captain, and his first assignment is at the Andrews Air Force Base. However, there is another part that was in the spirit. In March of This past year, he lost his little brother Preston to an accidental overdose of fentanyl. See, his younger brother Preston, his pain began the day he learned that somebody hurt his older brother. Preston was such a sweet person and has such a sweet soul. And he took his older brother's pain and he internalized it. And we all focused on that in his healing. And we all loved walking together as a family. Unfortunately, my son Preston created a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, and unfortunately lost his brother to those horrible diseases this past March. Although my son is looking to move on in this life, pursuing his dreams, he must now have to do it without his little brother Preston. My testimony, my son's testimony is what Kanika wanted to hide. My son's testimony, my testimony is what many organizations want to keep from the public knowing, also that way they can continue to stay in business. This has to stop. This bill ensures that the victims and families will always have their voice. HB 206 is the bill that will tell the perpetrators and child molesters that you are not welcome here in Texas. HB 206, perpetrators, criminals, we may not catch you today, but we will catch you tomorrow. We need to send a message that criminals are not welcome here in Texas, and organizations who hide systemic abuse will be held accountable, and the law will not protect you. I want to leave you with this. In the book of Exodus, God heard the cries of the Israelites, and God sent Moses to speak for them. Today, God once again hears the cries of young boys and girls who were and are victims of sexual abuse. God hears the cries of those who were raped and sodomized. He hears the cries of the innocent and the weak. He hears the cries of those who have no voice because of the current laws. So now, God has sent Representative Ann Johnson, Representative Wood. He has sent Senator Pete Flores to introduce his bill to change the law. He has sent my son Ashton, who was delivered from this horrible sex abuse, to rise up. He has sent me as a father to stand with him and all the survivors. He has sent Curtis. He has sent Patty with her talents to speak for those who cannot speak. He has sent Lisa. He has sent Zach. He has sent Julian. He has sent Richard to come together and form a coalition. He has sent Dr. Kempner and Michael Johnson to come forward against the Boy Scouts of America. God has sent SNAP, the SCSA, and many more agencies to speak on their behalf. He has sent us all to stand up for the injustice of taking the voice away from many victims. He has sent you to support HB 206 and give the voice back to the voiceless. Now, all that being said, Pharaoh also heard the cries of the Israelites, and as a result, Pharaoh made it harder for them to live. The same is taking place today. Insurance companies, Kanika, and all those who are willing to protect their interest over the victims will oppose this bill and want to make it harder for victims to speak and be heard. We cannot let this happen. Thank you.
As you are witnessing, most important to our movement are the individual stories of the many victims of sexual abuse throughout the Lone Star State. Here to share her experiences with you today is survivor and advocate Jillian Coburn.
morning, everyone. I'm super excited to be here. I'm also super excited to actually have a bill in place like we did in Louisiana. I'm originally from Lafayette, Louisiana. I'm also a victim advocate. I'm a survivor, and I'm a thriver. And I try and help others find their voice when they can't speak out. I'm going to ask the first question. I was taken out of Louisiana because my husband is a military guy, and we moved out of Lafayette and moved to Fort Hood. My question is, Texas is supposed to be the greatest state. Why are we the greatest state and you're behind Louisiana? That's my question to y'all. I am respectfully urging the state of Texas to pass House Bill 206 and SB 751. Currently, an individual who has experienced childhood sexual abuse has a statute of limitation to file a civil claim in a court in Texas. According to RAINN, every 9 minutes a child is sexually assaulted in the U.S. and 93 know the perpetrator. According to the U.S., a study conducted showed that the average age of time of reporting child sex abuse was 52 years of age. Imagine your own child having to work up the courage to tell you that their Uncle Jimmy touched them inappropriately. What would you do then? Would you listen to them? Would you turn a blind eye? Or would you have action? The moment the abuse occurs, a person's innocence is stripped from them. And I've seen it so many times, my best friend in particular. They do not choose this by choice, not because they want to lose their innocence, but because someone stole that from them. There are many people who believe that 10 years is enough once that person turns 18. But to those arguing this, I ask you this. Were you ever in a position where you wanted to come forward about something terrible that happened to you? Have you been stonewalled? I have. Have you been shamed? I have. Have you been ignored by people who are supposed to protect you from the evil that prowls around the earth? I have. Coming forward and working up the courage to speak out about any abuse that you have endured is one of the scariest things a person can do. It's something that takes time for a person to do. Kids who experience this abuse are scared. They don't have the mental capability to recognize that speaking up will result in a positive result, rather than a negative one, the negative one that Uncle Jimmy threatened. What are we doing to protect our kids? What are we doing to make sure that they feel safe in this world? Doesn't Texas proudly gloat about caring about children? Why then does the state seem to care more about protecting unborn children than our children that are on this earth? Why then are you placing a time limit on when a person can tell their truth based on the statistics showing that survivors typically come out about 35 years after turning 18? Why, I ask you, are you protecting people that prey on the innocent and steal their youth? I ask you to consider these questions I have posed when considering giving your vote for the action for change in our legislation. And I will let all legislation know that if you are against this, we will be blasting you because you are the problem. Thank you so much, and I hope all of you guys hear us today and protect our children from the past, the present, and the future.
Here with us today to share another riveting story of abuse is the co-leader of our San Antonio SNAP chapter. He's a fierce spokesperson, and as a deacon in the Catholic Church, he has very wonderful insight into their maneuvering. I welcome today Mr. Zach Cepeda.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. Yes, I am a cradle Catholic, and I still serve as an ordained deacon. My parents brought me and my siblings up in a very traditional Catholic home. From a a very early age, we were taught that priests were trusted pillars of the community and they would protect children. My abuser served in Victoria, Texas, where he raped a 4-year-old boy before being transferred to my family's parish in San Antonio. Transferring predators was the preferred method of getting rid of sexual abuse problems. After my sexual assault, my initial assault, I was told, don't tell anyone. I was 12 years old and the abuse continued for another 2 years. Life was a living nightmare. I had no clue who or how to tell, and eventually I chose to bury it. For decades, I suppressed the knowledge of what had happened. I believed people could see that I had been abused and that I must have asked for it. I couldn't forgive myself for doing whatever I did to invite the abuse. I couldn't figure out what I had done and was extremely angry with myself for being so flawed. I was angry, frustrated, and in pain. This led me to self-medicating with alcohol and drugs. I believed I had brought the abuse on myself. The depth and breadth of the child sexual abuse scandal is incredible. It's not a Catholic problem. It's not an American problem. It's a global plague that most people do not want to hear about, or more importantly, talk about. I am blessed with a most wonderful life partner. Without her help and support, I would still be in a quagmire of guilt and shame. While disgusting, it is still comforting to know so many tell me that I am not the only victim. Years of therapy and support groups have taught me that to heal, I must talk about the abuse. There is no healing without talking about what happened and dealing with it. I may never be healed, but I am in recovery. I can now speak freely about the abuse that happened to me. Sadly, most do not. Most victims of sexual abuse, of child sexual abuse, don't disclose that abuse until much later in life, if ever. They remain silent with no hope of recovering and healing. Every survivor has a story that must be heard, believed, and validated for healing to begin. Victims of sexual abuse did not ask to be abused. It's tremendously hurtful to be told that we should get over it. Eliminating the statute of limitations on child sexual abuse will encourage the silent and still suffering victims of abuse to come forward and speak their story. It will give them hope of healing, recovery, and justice. To my knowledge, victims don't seek recompense for their abuse. They seek comfort, healing, recovery, and peace. Do your part to support Texas SOL reform. Thank you.
Another victim who is here to share her story, Ms. Heather Thompson.
Hi there, my name is Heather Compton. I'm 35 years old, a veteran that served in the U.S. Army from 2004 to 2013. I'm a former victim of child sex abuse in Texas, New Mexico, and Oregon. I have sought justice in the atrocities committed against my own children by my brother and a close family friend in Texas. We are survivors and we stand here today to share our stories. Some may be difficult to hear and still difficult to share. When I was 4 years old, Roy Rico Rocha sexually assaulted me in Travis County. He was a neighbor my mother trusted for less than an hour while I napped. My mom came home from picking my brother up and checked on me. I told her Rico tried to put his penis in my vagina. He spent 20 years in prison the same day he was apprehended. I remember my forensic interview and reenacting what happened to me on Dolls in 1991. When I was 7 years old, I was molested by Patrick, my mother's bisexual boyfriend in Carlsbad, New Mexico. He has never been prosecuted. I came forward about the incident to a cousin when I was 9 that told my stepmom, that then told my dad. I was no longer in my mother's care. When I was 12 years old, I was sexually assaulted on a weekly basis and sometimes as many as 2 to 3 times a week by my uncle by marriage in Oregon. While under investigation, my aunt shipped us out of the state to move back to Texas. Her husband used to be a youth director and she ran a daycare at the time. We were in church every week in youth group. For 10.5 months I endured this hell and Stephen Buxman has yet to be prosecuted. He has 3 children and 1 is nonverbal. When my children were 9, Ashlyn Compton and Jacob Compton, they came forward about my brother Christopher Hobart sexually abusing them in 2015. He committed these crimes while I was working. In court, my brother admitted to 7 crimes against my children and accepted a 25-year plea deal. My children had been abused a year prior before they came forward about the abuse in 2016. While my children were forensically interviewed about my brother, I learned that Marcus Carrillo, a close family friend that lived with us for a few weeks, put his hands in my daughter's pants. It took my pursuit of justice and a 5-year fight for what my family considers a failure in justice. CPS and APD initially dropped the ball, and at their own admittance, after I pressed on and contacted the Ombudsman's office and APD's Sergeant White, I brought him my daughter's therapy records that held a bombshell of evidence appearing in Williamson County 7 times. Evidence which ensued the opening of the criminal investigation into Marcus Carrillo. It took over 2 years and me appearing in Williamson County 7 times for a lifetime protective order. In the end, D.A. McMillan lied to me and told me he would not entertain a plea deal less than 15 years. He offered a 3-year plea deal the day prior to jury selection, and Marcus had already spent 2 years and 9 months in Williamson County Jail. He is a registered sex offender. I ask, how often do you check the registry? His crimes were aggravated sexual assault and indecency with a minor. He fondled my daughter and the teens. He was released 89 days later after court. Clearly, not all individuals that are placed in a position to fight for our most vulnerable, our children, should not represent our counties or our state. I ask, are you ready to be our voice? Will you stand with us to protect our children and the citizens in the state? As you can see, justice is yet to be served in 2 of my cases. My own children did not come forward either initially. It takes courage to speak up. Please pass House Bill 206 and SB 751 and help bring justice to thousands of families across Texas. Lift the statute of limitations on child sex crimes. I appreciate your time regarding this matter.
We'd like to thank you very much for being here with us today. And in closing, I just want to remind everyone, we still have Carol. Carol, would you like to say something? Okay. I want to remind everyone that besides the victims that you've heard from here today, there are also victims and survivors amongst you out there that are not speaking. And I want to tell you that, number one, you have to keep in mind that they're not all old people like me and Richard and my colleagues here. As a matter of fact, out here in the audience today, we have a 14-year-old that was victimized 2 years ago at 12 that is here standing up and seeing how the justice system works and what the justice system is going to do in the case of, in her case. I want to also tell you that please visually take home with you, as we have been speaking here about our experiences. You've been seeing lots of groups of children walking into the Capitol. I want you to visualize that as you go home, because we are here fighting for something, but what we're actually doing is we're fighting for their future. Those little children that you just saw coming into the Capitol. So we urge you to call your representatives and make sure that these bills get passed. I'd like to also thank Representative Jean Wu, Representative Ann Johnson, our guest speakers, most importantly, the victims that have spoken. I'd like to thank SurvivingScouting.org, SCSA, and SNAP. Thank all of you for being here with us today. Have a good day.